With the 2020s half over now, I think it's about time to do a little assessment of the movies that have come out so far in the decade and give you my personal favorite top 10. While I know the title of the video is the best movies of the 2020s so far, or of the decade so far, the reality is this is my favorites, because there is no objective ranking of the best movies. It's really just your personal opinion on stuff and what you enjoyed. This is definitely not going to be a list that is for everybody, but obviously this is my list, so let me know yours down below. Let's get through some honorable mentions real quick. I just wanted to include these in no particular order. All Quiet on the Western Front, Talk to Me, Alien Romulus, The Menu, Longlegs, Nope, and Nosferatu all were stunning films, but just barely missed that top 10. Number 10. Now, the first thing I want to mention going into this list is that honestly, the first couple years of the 2020s were really plagued by COVID, and a lot of great movies ended up getting delayed, so you really won't see any movies from 2020 in here. A lot of the better movies that, had a lot of hope in their success ended up actually delaying their release to the post-COVID era, where people could go back into the theaters and they could make a bigger, profit on the box office. One of the first movies that I remember coming back to the theaters to see was Spider-Man No Way Home. And I would not consider myself somebody who's like a massive Marvel fan or comic book fan. However, I did kind of grow up with the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. They were like my sister's favorite movies growing up, so I ended up having them on repeat throughout the years. I actually didn't love them that much when I was a kid, but, watching them more recently and reflecting back on everything, they really just stand above all of the Marvel drivel that's just been coming out lately. And seeing a movie that somehow manages to tie all these different eras of Spider-Mans together, even the Andrew Garfield I remember liking when they came out. I watched them with my girlfriend at the time in theaters. They weren't obviously great movies either, but this movie manages to pull together an entire childhood and lifetime of fandom in Spider-Man into something that revives that kind of serious and crucial and heavy tone of moments in the first two Spider-Man movies with the new Tom Holland era. It is potentially the most crowd-pleasing movie I have ever seen. And I'll never forget seeing the three Spider-Mans teamed up. That just started a new era that, for better or for worse, this is going to be something that other studios look to replicate going forward. And resuscitating all these villains in a way that actually felt meaningful was something that I just did not expect to happen. I thought they were going to squander the Green Goblin. I thought they were going to make the movie silly or funny instead of actually a serious callback to that character who really deserves that respect. And every character they resuscitated, they did for a purpose, and it felt like there was actually weight and meaning. The movie's consistently hilarious and has brutal stakes, and it really just, it reminds you of an era of superhero films that just doesn't exist anymore. Shockingly, number 9, right after that comment, is Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3. And I think out of all the Guardians movies, this actually is my favorite of all. And that's really shocking because I really do love 1. And I actually think I like 2 even more. So personally, it's probably the rarest opinion to have, but I think they've gotten better with every single release. This movie goes dark. It goes intense. It's exceedingly weird and quirky. It has all of the character that I hope to see in a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, where you have these weird characters that are all hodgepodge together in a space adventure. It has all the fun that all of the other Marvel movies lately seem to be missing. And the fact that they went there with the disturbing subject matter makes it feel like it's something that had balls. It had the willingness to go places that all of the other Marvel movies seem like they're in that streaming territory where they're trying not to offend anybody. They're trying not to be too intense. They're just trying to be middle of the road and everything, but they don't really excel at anything because of that. This movie really feels like it goes for it, and it was such a return to form for me. Number 8 is a movie that I know a lot of people hate, and that's Babylon. This 3-hour sprawling epic sees Damien Chazelle, probably my favorite director ever at this point, having directed La La Land and Whiplash. It sees him at his craziest, going all over the place with the sporadic, sprawling tale, has entire sections broke off for Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man character, dark version. There's just so much chaos in this movie, but there's something so magical about the journey. It's kind of got that, epic Scorsese vibe that he was going for in The Irishman and in Killers of the Flower Moon, but to me, this movie has such more of a spark to it, I guess. It has so many, hilarious and just hysterical scenes with Brad Pitt's character. And then you have scenes that are just so gut-wrenching and powerful, and you have that classic music that's always ever present in Damien Chazelle's films. I loved the finale. I know it's controversial, but I just, to me, I don't know if I had a better theater experience with any other movie that's below it on the list here. This movie just blew me away, and every time I think about it, every time I pop it back in to watch, a clip or two or to get through the whole movie again, I just find myself finding something else to like about it. It is a little bit bloated. There's a couple little side characters that don't really need to be there, like that whole snake scene with the burlesque dancer girl. But outside of that, this kind of just revives that magical, musical, movie epic that I loved out of La La Land, and it kind of brings that back to form for Damien Chazelle. Number 7 is Oppenheimer. And originally, I kind of, similarly to Babylon, I actually felt like there was a little bit too much in there, and that, that last section of all the politicking of the trial and everything felt a little bit tacked on, especially after the gravity of those events in, the actual World War II events that happened. However, the more I thought about it, you realize that is how the future of nuclear weapons is going to be. It's going to be a struggle for power over those weapons, and that politicking is actually so emblematic of how dangerous it is for humans to have that capability. I also loved how the movie didn't really feel like it was preaching too much to me, and there were so many visually creative ways to show haunting thoughts and imagery. So just a great example is that one, I think everybody probably knows it by now, is that one where Oppenheimer's giving his speech and he's feeling the heat and the light from the blast just echo over him as the crowd kind of like fades into ash. And that's such a great way of portraying the guilt rather than having him say, "Oh, I feel the guilt of everything on me." It's just, so many little creative visual ways. The movie has such a quick pace to it. It's snappy, it's funny, it's disturbing, it's thought-provoking. And I love that it has those different, time jumping periods, and each one has its own purpose. So yeah, just fantastic movie. Number 6 is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. And I have been trying to get people to, like, every person I talk to, I'm like, please watch Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. It is so much better than you think it will be. I promise. This is the moment on the list where we're starting to get to 10 out of 10s. So everything above here is a movie that I would give a 10 out of 10, of which there are not too many this, in this decade so far, as you can see if there's only 6. But this is potentially my favorite, standard, typical animated movie of all time. It has the most disturbing and memorable villain that I can remember in animation history. It has the most beautiful animation maybe I've ever seen. It has like really disturbing and off-kilter jokes that you wouldn't expect in a kid's movie. That is just amazing to see. It is the most startling visual art style that I've ever seen. It's kind of got that Spider-Verse style, but personally I prefer the pace that this movie runs at. The Spider-Verse movies can be a little bit ADHD for me, a little bit spastic, which is awesome. And I actually really almost thought about putting the second Spider-Verse movie on the honorable mentions list. However, Puss in Boots is just, I guess it's just more my thing. And the music is fantastic as well. So just constantly, I love his fear of death, the anxiety. Again, the villain is really the hero of this entire film for me. It keeps me coming back, keeps me recommending it to people. I couldn't ask for more out of this film, and I can't wait to see what they do next in the Puss in Boots Shrek world. I haven't seen the trailers, but looking forward to it based off this movie. Just the most magical animated movie I've seen in a long time. However, number 5 is technically also an animated movie, but it's also kind of not. We have Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which is, a very different type of animated movie. It's not an adventure. It's not nearly as much for kids. This is very much a movie that can be watched by kids, but to me, it's really a movie for adults, to be honest. The subject matter is quite depressing. It's about life. It's about loss. It's about family. And it's such an emotional powerhouse of a film. I love the way that the voice is done. It's very cute, but also slightly weird. The movie is very weird. It has a very weird sense of humor, but in a way that makes it feel like the fact that you enjoy it makes it feel like it's a movie that was just made for you. And I think that's something that's missing out of, again, going back to those big budget Marvel type movies, is they're made to appeal to the most amount of people possible. But when you find a movie like this that just feels so much smaller scale and so much more beautiful, so much more heartfelt, it feels more tailored to you and to your experiences. And, I'll always remember those little scenes of, Marcel vomiting on himself, or it just sounds so ridiculous to say, or the 60 Minutes interviews, and just the way it kind of incorporates something like even YouTube into it makes it feel like it was made for somebody like me who grew up on YouTube and is obviously on YouTube now. So yeah, if you need a heartfelt, beautiful movie, I can't recommend Marcel the Shell more. Number 4 is the most recent film on this list, which is Strange Darling from last year. This is a very like low budget murder mystery type movie. It's a cat and mouse movie, told a little bit out of sequence. I'm not going to spoil anything because I know a lot of people haven't seen this movie, but it is visually striking and stunning. It's philosophically and socially thought-provoking, and feels like it's something that goes a little bit outside of the Hollywood box. Like it feels like it's trying to say something that Hollywood wouldn't typically say. And I appreciate a movie that has the courage to really say something. There's a powerhouse acting performance, actually multiple powerhouse acting performances. The movie's tense. The movie's beautiful to look at. It's very entertaining. It can be funny at times. It's almost like a noir film. It's got like this type of like mystery and kind of impending sense of doom, and just so much to love here. I don't want to say too much to spoil anything, but it's just it's a movie that I wish got a lot more attention at the box office, so I always take a chance to recommend it when I can as my favorite movie of last year. Number 3 is Tar. Now this movie's kind of in the vein of a Whiplash, or it's about like an obsessive artist, and it's also about your past. I'm trying to like explain what it's about, but it's kind of challenging to do so without spoiling things. It does have moments about cancel culture. This is another movie similar to Strange Darling that has kind of this social and political and philosophical commentary on life and humanity and social expectations and social standards and how can you recover from things that you may have done in your past as well. And I love how both of these movies, Tar and Strange Darling, approach this at a slightly off angle from, I guess, what you would probably typically expect from Hollywood. Just that slight twist of perspective, the slight muddling of the playing field, I guess. It's so much more complex than a preachy film that's like telling you exactly how to feel about something. And I also just appreciate how eloquent the characters are and how intelligent the dialogue is. It feels so elevated in that way as you're following somebody who's a conductor of a prestigious orchestra in Germany, speaks multiple languages. Like there's just this air of elegance around the film and coldness that ends up making it makes it feel more self-important in some ways, but it also makes it feel like the characters think they're better than you when they're really not. So there's a lot of like, again, nuance there. And I think that's where Tar and Strange Darling really excel, is in that nuance of perspective. And they're so thought-provoking. They had me talking for hours after the film ended about their meanings and what the movie was saying, and if you agreed with certain things the movie might have been saying, or if you didn't. Like that's that type of movie that inspires all of this conversation. That's the type of movie that I, find myself attracted to the most, is something that I want to consistently go back to and show other people and see what they think about it and have debates about it. And I just loved it. Just such an intense and beautiful film. Number 2, we have Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is such a crowd-pleasing film. It's such a wacky, goofy, quirky movie, just like I talked about with Marcel the Shell. It's a movie that feels like it was made for you, but, ended up, winning all these Oscars, but it felt so niche. It felt so specific to our time. It felt so specific to our generation. And to people in my age bracket, I'm 28, so people around my age group that grew up with the internet and the kind of feeling of loneliness and isolation that comes with all of that. And how I love, what I particularly love the most about this film, though, out of everything, is how it makes, the simple, the mundane, your family, your loved ones, just going to a little party at your family workplace, how it makes all of these things mean something. It makes them all larger than life. And in a world where there's just so much nihilism and negativity and toxicity all the time, for a movie to just be throwing back in that message of love and the importance of the everyday actions that you make, and how, you can be a superhero as well. That type of heartwarming message, it just it really spoke to me, but it spoke to everybody that I know that saw it as well. And so it captured a feeling in a moment. It was hysterical. It makes you cry. It makes you laugh. It makes you proud. It makes you depressed. It's just such a whirlwind of emotions, just like it says in the title. And, you know, in the moments where the movie finally calms down and just has a moment to reflect, like, you know, when the rocks are speaking to each other, like those are the moments that make this movie a movie that I'll remember it to the day I die, and I'll share it with my children. I'll share it with everybody at some point, and I would want them to go through that experience with me with this film. But number one, and this was definitely not expected when I was originally making this list, but the more I've thought about it, the more I just had to be honest with myself. And again, this is a list for me. It's not a list for you guys. Is The Batman. And I was shocked. I'm as shocked as you guys are that, you know, The Batman ended up being my number one of the decade so far. But I remember the first time I saw this movie, it was on an airplane, and I had the worst audio quality, the worst visual quality, and yet every single frame, I found myself absolutely and unbelievably glued to the screen. There is a component of this movie that reminds me of Saw and of Seven, which are two of my absolute favorite films of all time. However, it also elevates it in a way that makes it even more beautiful. Like, there are so many scenes and the music in here, it comes together to be like a movie's movie. It feels like one of those big epic films that deserves the big budget, deserves a sold out audience, but it's kind of telling a story that feels a little bit more like that, you know, Saw or that Seven, where it's like these really disturbing, off-putting, dark, creepy serial killer type films that have horror-ish like contraptions and situations in it, but it's packaged in this way that also makes it accessible to a bigger audience. The soundtrack is one of my favorites of all time, the original score, and there are just so many non-stop frameable images in this film. I want to frame like every other scene. I love the chemistry between the characters. I feel so much as somebody who's been in dark places and has been nihilistic and hopeless before. Again, just like Everything Everywhere All at Once takes it from this, you know, purely fantastical and positive route. The Batman really goes into the depths of darkness here, and you see and understand. If you've ever been in that kind of place, you can see and understand why Bruce would begin to have, you know, no hope for humanity anymore. But to be in that type of place and then see the way that he's actually scaring the people he's meaning to help, and seeing how he ends up actually inspiring the villains that he's fighting, and having to come to terms with that, and in terms of personal growth, and find something not to just hate, but actually something to fight for, is something that I find so relevant to me in my personal life, to so many people in this current era where, again, nihilism has just taken hold and taken over. But it does so by the end with the most beautiful scenes ever, with him holding, I'm getting like emotional just thinking about it, but him holding that torch and leading people through the darkness, through the waiting, through the water, through it all. And he becomes a force, a light to lead people forward rather than something hiding in the shadows. And, you know, that whole process paired with the, you know, insanity and the darkness of it all. I love that aesthetic and everything as well. So it just ends up being something that was, you know, perfectly tailored for me. I love the mystery of it all as well. The riddles are so fun to follow. There's actually some really great humor in here, even though it's a little bit subtle. And there's so many cool shots, like when he's just the first scene of the movie, when the Riddler shows up behind that congressman and you just see his eyes glow up with those goggles. There's just so many scenes when his boots come stepping out from the darkness at the beginning, that I could go on and on about this movie. But anyway, and then I watched The Penguin, which was also fantastic. Not quite as good as the movie, but, you know, that's my favorite movie of the decade, so it's not like it was still fantastic. So but that's just my list. Let me know your guys down below. I'd love to see what you guys thought. You know, those movies on my honorable mentions, there were more that could have been on there. I've had a lot of 9s and 8s that could have made the list as well. Fantastic movies, just barely didn't make the list. I'm hoping that the second half of the decade is even stronger, which is, you know, a high bar to pass, but we'll keep hoping. And hope you guys all have a great day. See you later. Peace.